everyone to this space. Today I'm gonna have a sweet talk with Ruth Ramsey. We're gonna talk about sex coaching and why it's so important to be connected with your sexual life and about the art of striptease. That's why I have this amazing sex coach, erotic award winner, and a striptease teacher with me, Ruth. Hello.
Hello, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being here and making a space in your agenda.
Mm,
I
mhm,
think you do an amazing job, and I want everyone to know about it. So, if you could tell me a little bit more about you.
mm. Well, I have been working as a sex educator and sex coach for 3 years now, which isn't long, but my history in kind of the sexual world goes back a lot longer than that. So I began working as a striptease artist in London around 2002 when I was in my mid 20s. It was a fantasy that I'd always had since I'd been a little girl, but that I'd never imagined could actually come to reality. So I worked hard at school, I did a degree in journalism, and I was working as a fashion journalist when I saw an advert for the London School of Striptease. And I thought I would just go and explore this fantasy that I had. But actually, that led to me then working as a striptease artist and then also teaching striptease, becoming involved in activism and campaigning around sexual rights, working as a journalist around adult topics, organising events, and lots of amazing things for about 12 years. I then had a bit of time out of that world because I became a stepmom and had to move out of London. So I moved into the countryside, too far from the city. Became a stepmom to children who were too young to understand or for it to be appropriate. And so for several years, I was away from kind of the sexy industries, but I missed it so much and wanted to come back to it. And I did a life coaching diploma. I didn't know what I would coach people around, but many people had said to me, you'd make an amazing life coach. So I did this diploma. And then about 2 months after I graduated, somebody said to me, will you coach me about sex? And the reason she told me that she felt comfortable to talk to me was because of my history, because I'd been a striptease artist and a model and been involved in kink and all of this life experience. She said, I know that you're not going to judge me or slut shame me, and I can tell you anything. And so that was the moment that I realized that I could combine my coaching with my interest and life experience and fascination with sex. And here we are now.
I'm curious about what people usually ask you the most.
Mm. Well, this is interesting because obviously speak to so many different people about sex. I speak to my clients, I speak to people who are on my courses, but also so many other people want to ask me things when they hear what I do. Sometimes it's podcast hosts. Once we stop the recording, then they'll have so many questions.
Yeah.
um, and I do tend to hear the same kind of questions from people. So a big one is just, am I weird or is there something wrong with me? Because, and then the things that normally come up are to do with fantasies and desires. Typically, I fantasize about sex with someone other than my partner. Is there something wrong with me? Does it mean I need to end the relationship? Or I fantasize about power games and kink. Again, is there something wrong with me? Or I fantasize about group sex, or I'm interested in this thing or that thing, or my clitoris, the head of my clitoris is bigger than what I see in porn films. So many things. And people just, I think, want reassurance from an expert that they are
Yeah.
entirely normal. All of those things. I struggle to think of anything that I've heard that is actually abnormal. But what we're presented as being the right way to feel about sex, the right things to want, the right way for our body to look is so narrow compared to the reality. So yeah, people want reassurance that they're normal.
most part of those questions and insecurities come from because we don't have enough information of what is good, what is wrong, what is
Mm.
normal, what it's not.
Um, People ask me, can I get my sex life back? Maybe they're getting older, maybe they had a young family and sex stopped then. Um, Maybe it's just that they've been in a long-term relationship for a long time and the sex has stopped, and they're very concerned to know, is it possible to get my sex life back? And for those people, I would say just the fact you're asking, the fact you care and that you have an interest and you clearly miss sex, tells me everything I need to know in saying, yes, you can. However, rather than looking back at how your sex life was in the past, looking to get that back, what I encourage people to do is realize that their sex life might look totally different now. You know, their bodies are different, maybe their relationships different, their life experience and their interests are different. So rather than saying, can I get back to what I had before, it's a case of kind of having a reset and saying, okay, I'm interested in having a sexual side to my life again. Let's be curious. What can that look like now? What does that mean to me now? And go out with that spirit of positivity and curiosity. That's a much healthier approach.
It's possible to get back the sexual attraction to someone.
Yes, yeah, I believe so. But as I say, it needs a reset. It needs to say, okay, let's start this again, instead of trying to get to
To get
back
back.
to where they were before.
Yeah.
And usually, what happens, sex stops because we get busy in life doing other things. It's because we have a family or because we're very busy in our careers and our social lives. It's normally not because we stop fancying each other. It's because other things come in and take our time and energy. So it's about partly making time again. There's this taboo around putting sex in the diary. People believe that it must be spontaneous. And again, this is another kind of Hollywood and television myth. And we think it's a failure if we need to get our diary out and plan it. But when our lives are so busy, and busier than ever with the constant temptation of Netflix, Instagram, you know, there's always now something to do, um, let alone work and family and community and things. We do actually need to put it in the diary for it to happen. And so that's something that I recommend to clients. And very often they're very resistant. And I'll say, please just try it for 1 month. And if it doesn't work, I will never mention it again. But it does work.
Very important for the people that are listening to us. You can schedule your
Mm-hmm.
sexual life, and that it's all
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. And most people, when I say to them, okay, when you do have sex, and by have sex, I mean enjoy sexual play with your partner, whatever that means to you. Um, when you do, afterwards, do you think, well, that was a waste of time? I wish I'd watched Netflix. Or do you say to each other, that was great, we should do that more often? And people say, that was great, we should do it more often.
Yeah.
Um, and the more you do it, the more you have that feeling, the more you want to do it. But certainly at first, it might mean, as I say, actually putting it in the diary. But in doing that, you're agreeing with each other, this is important to us. And that in itself is a turn on, you know, and then you're seeing it in the diary from a week before or a few days before, and remembering that you two have made that agreement because it's important to you. And you start to think about, oh, well, what could we do that's a bit different? And you bring a certain energy to it, and it makes it better. And then you want to do it more.
And then you want to
So,
explore more. And
exactly.
any other thing that you get asked
Um,
that it's quite common?
yeah. So I get asked usually by women, but sometimes by men. My partner isn't interested in sex, and I don't want to cheat on them. I have no interest in going somewhere else, but I miss sex and I miss having a sex life. What can I do? So, with a question like that, obviously everybody's situation is very unique. Um, I will talk through, first of all, certain practicalities. So, Has your partner gone on to a certain medication? For example, antidepressants can affect people's libido. So could there be a medical issue? If they're getting into midlife, I ask whether they are able to communicate about the changes in midlife. Because if sex has become less comfortable, or for a male partner, maybe they're not getting, their penis isn't getting erect as quickly or becoming as hard, we can get very self-conscious and shy and not tell our partner and just avoid sex and avoid talking about it. And the partner thinks, oh, they're not interested in me anymore. They're not interested in sex. You can see how very quickly that becomes a situation where there's no sex in that relationship. Whereas
Exactly.
if they could talk to each other and understand that the changes they're experiencing are normal, then they can find that there is a sex life there for them. So first of all, looking at medical issues and physical issues, wider issues in the relationship. So they might need couples counselling if there's a lot of deep historical resentments, for example. But then to say to that person, take responsibility, take ownership of your own sexual life as an individual. So instead of waiting for the partner to be ready,
Hmm.
you can go on your own journey of self-discovery. So not with having sex with other people, but learning more about yourself and what do you like and need? What are you curious about? How is your body changing? What different types of pleasure can you give yourself? In doing this, it's good for that individual. But also, I've seen many times what happens is the partner becomes more interested, because there can be a lot of guilt and a lot of pressure if you're avoiding sex and you know your partner is disappointed and frustrated. Maybe they've initiated, you've said no lots of times. That guilt and that pressure and stress itself is a huge turn off. Whereas when you see your partner exploring themselves as an individual sexual being, the pressure's off you, but then also you get a bit more interested because you've been reminded they're separate. We can almost get too close to each other in sex. So suddenly you see your partner off on this sexual self-exploratory journey, the pressure's off you, and suddenly you're interested.
Yeah.
I tend to recommend podcasts most of all, if somebody is curious to begin their journey of learning more, because for one, podcasts are up to date. A lot is changing in sexual science research. We're learning more all the time. And if you're reading a book that's 10 years old, it might still be amazing. But if you listen to that author on a podcast recorded last month, you know it's up to date. But more importantly, to hear people talking out loud about sex and using sexual words
Hmm.
gives us the permission, drops the shame, and we
Hmm.
realize we can talk about sex. So yeah, just put sex into a podcast platform.
Hmm.
And if it's a reputable platform, it will be educational content, not porn, and
Uh,
see what grabs your interest.
you say that nowadays we have distractions as Instagram, Netflix, right? That we always have something to do. In the last 10 years, the young generations are having less sex
Mm.
than older generations when they were our age. Why is that?
Um, well, I've seen also numerous studies that say younger people are having less sex. Um, so I am 47 as we're recording this. I was born in 1975. And like I remember when there were only three television channels and no mobile phones, yeah. And there was lots more time to have sex.
Yes.
You know, I mean, at that time, let me think, was I working? Maybe just at the start of me working. But, you know, after you'd done whatever you did in your day, be it college or work or whatever, came home and cooked and had dinner, if there wasn't something on one of those three television channels you wanted to watch, and if you didn't fancy reading a book and you had a partner, you
You
went
will
to
be like,
bed.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are more stressed as well because
Yes.
there's constant, you know, we have the news on our phones all the time. And when we're stressed, we desire sex less.
Tell me a little bit about your striptease career.
Well, as I said in the introduction, I'd always had a fantasy of being a stripper. And I don't know how I knew what a striptease artist was. I think maybe from James Bond films or James Bond books and the dancing girls at the start of the Bond films, particularly when I was growing up in the 80s. But I'd always had this fantasy and I got to actually live that fantasy and I loved it. And for me, it was a very, very positive experience. I dance mostly in very small venues rather than in big clubs. So that I know that that has an influence on my experience because they're very different working environments. But to me, it was very empowering. It taught me so much about life, about sexual energy, about people of all different genders. And it was an incredibly positive experience for me.
How was the beginning for the people you will have around?
It was a big problem. I mean, I look back and I think that didn't I wasn't careful enough in how I told the people who were close to me, because for
Mhm.
me, it was this amazing thing that I just wanted to tell everyone and talk, 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 talk. And it was it was difficult. So the guy I was seeing, he wasn't a serious boyfriend, but we'd been together about nearly 2 years. That ended. I lost a couple of friends. My mum and dad, we didn't speak for about 6 months. It was very difficult. At the time, it was much more taboo than it is now, even.
Yeah, that.
So, yeah,
Mhm.
it was 2002. So now we see J Lo pole dancing in the film Hustlers. We see all this stuff, but back then, I think people were, particularly my mum, was very scared for me
Yeah.
of where this was going to lead. But over time, people got used to the idea. The people who I kept in my life, like obviously my mum
Mm.
and dad, and then they got to see that I was doing positive things with it. That I was doing journalism. I was doing campaigning for sexual rights. They saw that I was happy and healthy, um, and they began to support me. And now they're very proud of me.
What would you say to someone that doesn't know what is to be an striptease dancer?
Um, I would say that, I mean, the people who think it's dirty and dark typically are the same kind of people who think sexual pleasure is something dirty and dark and wrong, maybe. Um, but I would say that when you're dancing, you are in control of what you're doing. Um, you are embodying the music. So when I was dancing, I had total choice over what music I danced to, what outfits I wore, how I danced, total artistic freedom, which is wonderful and quite rare in the various artistic fields. Um, and what I was doing was expressing my sexual self in a way, in fact, that society didn't let me express it. So I couldn't go to a nightclub and dance as sexily as I wanted to in a little mini dress because I'd just get loads of hassle from guys, or I'd be judged, or I'd feel unsafe. And actually, it was in the striptease venues that I could kind of relish myself as a sexual woman and enjoy sharing that energy. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that we need to be recognized as sexual beings, and that that's something different to wanting sex. So what I mean by that, for example, think a guy has come into the strip club who doesn't have a girlfriend, maybe is very shy, not confident, maybe has never had a girlfriend, and there's nobody in his day-to-day life ever who looks at him as a sexual being. Yeah, but of course he is a sexual being. It's almost a kind of therapy, and this was my favorite thing about the work, just to look in someone's eyes when you are embodying your sexual self, to share that energy with them. You see the change in someone's face. You see them relax. You see them think, oh, thank goodness, someone is seeing that I'm a sexual being. And there
Hmm.
doesn't need to be more than that. That doesn't mean that he's going to try and touch you. It doesn't mean he's going to try and follow you home. It's a separate thing to that. Um, and I think it's incredibly powerful. It's my campaigning around the sexual recognition of people with disabilities is what led to me winning the Erotic Award. Um, because if it is totally ignored that we are sexual beings, that we have any kind of sexual desire, then that's a part of ourselves that's being ignored. And for me, when I was working as a striptease artist, it was expressing my own sexual energy and sharing it with an audience. And in so doing, recognizing they are sexual beings as well. And that was a beautiful thing to do. And I believe very positive. I mean, you can hear in my voice now.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
No,
very
no.
positive, very healthy, and a very beautiful thing to do. It's when sexual energy is shut down, when we're told it's bad, it's wrong, you mustn't feel that. Um, you use a wheelchair, so you will never have a sex life. You're single and um, don't look how society thinks you should. You'll never have sex. No, that's wrong. We're all sexual beings, and that needs to be recognized.
What do you miss the most now about your striptease career? Well, when you were dancing, because now you're teaching, so you're
Mm-hmm.
still active.
Yes, yeah. And I love when I'm teaching to do a demo for the students because I do miss it.
What is what you teach about striptease?
So my beginners striptease workshop, people can be surprised that it's about how to get in touch with and then express your sexual self. So what I do not do is just teach a choreography to a song that I have chosen, because everybody is different in in what kind of turns them on, in a sense of what makes them feel that they want to dance and they want to express themselves. So it's more about helping people understand that the best striptease is going to be when they are um, in tune with their sexual self. It's about bringing their sexual energy out and sharing it through their performance. For one person, that's going to be to heavy thrash metal. For another person, that's going to be to Nina Simone or Ella Fitzgerald.
Mm.
So for a beginner's lesson, I'm teaching how to get in touch with yourself and almost giving permission to express, for them to express their own selves. And then, yes, teaching some basic movements and combinations. Theories such as, if you want your audience to look at one particular thing, so if you're undoing buttons on a blouse, to keep the rest of the body still. So there's only one thing for the audience to look at. Um, so I'm teaching those kinds of theories such that students can then go away and put that to their own choice of music, to their own style of outfit. So that's where I always start for beginners, as a beginner's masterclass. And then from there, it depends on what the particular student wants and needs.
Could you give three tips to start in that exploration with oneself?
Okay, first of all, um, if possible, try to look at yourself with entirely new eyes. So we assume that our bodies should work a certain way or should like certain things. Um, but these assumptions are normally what has been put in by media, by culture, by our upbringing. Try and drop those assumptions away and try and explore yourself physically with your hands. Don't just go uh, to the traditional sexual areas. Explore yourself head to toe and see what feels good. Um, if you always masturbate in one particular way, try different ways. Try being in a different position. If you always use a toy, try your hands. Or if you always use your hands, try a toy. And just try to be curious about what actually gives your body pleasure. So that's one thing. Um, The second one would be to make sure you understand the basics of sexual science. So, for example, we think, as I've said earlier, that sex should be spontaneous, that suddenly we must want sex. And if we don't suddenly want it, there's something wrong with us. But for the vast majority of people, that's not how desire works. Um, so, to understand the basics of sexual science. There's a series on Netflix called oh, it was in my head and it's gone. Something the principles of pleasure. The principles of pleasure. So there's great stuff now that's accessible on Instagram. There's great sex educator accounts. Make sure you understand the science of what you're working with. And then the last thing I'd say is try to be curious about all different types of sexual play. So, for example, if you think you're not very interested in any power play or kink, that's fine, but maybe listen to one podcast about it. The more we can open our minds to what's out there, the more we find that actually maybe we are interested in certain things, or it can confirm we're not interested in that, but maybe somebody thinks of kink as being only whips and chains, and they listen to a podcast and they realize it can be so much more than that. And there's something in there they think, well, that is interesting. Don't just look to work with what you already know turns you on or what you think should turn you on, because there's so much more out there. And with podcasts and Instagram and everything, we've now got the tools to go and explore that. So I suppose with all of them, it's be open-minded, be curious, look forward instead of looking back at your sex life in the past. Look forward and be curious for what can work for you now.
All right, so we have a whole manual to start. But if people, our listeners, would like to have more information about you, your courses, your projects, where can they find you?
On my website, ruthramsey.com, that explains everything I do, the courses that I've got coming up. There's a free download there as well about rebooting your sex life. And then they can also email me via that as well. And then also on Instagram at Ruth Ramsey _. I love Instagram. I'm on it all day. I love getting DMs. So feel free to reach out on there as well.
Thank you for sharing your experience, your knowledge. Hopefully, we can have another chat because I have so many questions to ask
Yeah,
you.
I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, our listeners, thank you for being there. Thank you for your support and see you in the next episode.